my name is Aiden Vaughn, and welcome to my channel. This week I will be reviewing Daredevil Born Again. It was written by Frank Miller with art by David Mazzucchelli. It was released in the mid-1980s and by Marvel Comics publishing company. Now, I really like this book because it brings out Daredevil's really shines a light on his history and his powers and abilities as a man, and his determination and will to get things done. Now, basically the gist of it is Karen Page, Daredevil's the love of his life, is now in Mexico, and she is addicted to heroin and is making pornographic films. And she decides to sell his secret identity for a fix of heroin. Immediately she regrets it, but nonetheless she still does it. And so word gets to the Kingpin, who is Wilson Fisk, the Daredevil's main enemy, the Kingpin of Crime, and he's also a villain of Spider-Man, a shared one. Now word gets to the Kingpin that this guy knows who Daredevil is, and he wants to sell him the information. So he's like, okay, and kill everyone who knows, except for, everyone in our organization. And so they kill the man that bought the information from Karen, and then they try and kill Karen, but she escapes. And then she goes back to New York City to try and get Matt Murdock, who is Daredevil, to help her and ask for his forgiveness. And so meanwhile, Matt Murdock is in his apartment, and his life is just falling apart because the IRS froze his assets. He's being called to a meeting of the Bar Association because he's been accused of accepting bribes, and so he might be disbarred, and he eventually is, so he can't be a lawyer anymore. And his girlfriend breaks up with him, and just everything's falling apart, and it's crappy. He's like, oh damn it. And so from there his luck just keeps on getting worse. His house is blown up, and he finds out that it was Wilson Fisk who had done it because Fisk had left Daredevil's costume out. And so he realizes from that, he's like, oh, it's the Kingpin. Somehow he figured out who I am, and so I'm gonna just have to fight him. And so so he goes to the Kingpin's office and beats him up, but then the Kingpin beats him up even more, leaves him for dead, but he manages to survive, and so he's just stumbling around the city, just badly injured. And then he ends up in his old neighborhood, Hell's Kitchen, and he eventually passes out, and then he wakes up in this church, and this nun named Maggie is nursing him back to health. And then he finds Karen, and from there they start being boyfriend and girlfriend again. And then he's trying to figure out how he's going to take the Kingpin down, and then all the while the Kingpin is getting access to this guy named Nuke, who's a Captain America wannabe, because the U.S. government tried to remake the process that made Steve Rogers Captain America, but it failed to an extent, so he's still a super soldier, but he's batshit crazy. And so he just starts opening fire on New York City to draw Daredevil out so we can kill him for the Kingpin. And So he's just like nuts. He still thinks he's in Vietnam, even though he isn't. And so, yeah, he's crazy like that. It was the 80s, so. Anyway, then Matt beats the shit out of him, and I mean crazy, with the help of Captain America. And then Matt gets enough evidence to take down the Kingpin, and then he does. And then it ends with him and Karen, you know, walking down the street, and he's thinking to himself, things are looking up. Now, as I said, I really like this book. I highly recommend it to you. It's from Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli's legendary run on Daredevil that ran from the late 1970s to the mid-1980s. This is like The Dark Knight Returns for Daredevil in the sense that it made people really like Daredevil for his grittiness and his and made them question what is justice, and are our morals, you know, worth protecting, and stuff like that. And it's a good read. The art is beautiful. There's some art right there. And yeah, please like and subscribe, and leave a comment with any feedback or suggestions, and have a good rest of the week.